our folder, our file explorer, whatever it is you're using, open as well. And what I want you to do to start out with is we want to go to Documents. If we haven't done this already, I'm not sure if we did this in here or not. And under Documents, we want to create a folder and call it Websites. Inside the Websites folder, I want you to create a folder. And I want you to call it Inside Out, exactly the way it is up here. Then we're looking at exactly the same folder all the time, right? Web-100-inside-out-html-1221. Alt-tab and go to brackets. In brackets, we're going to go to File, Open Folder. And what you're going to do, and what we want to do is do folder open, and we want to go out to the folder that we created, and then hit select folder. And this is what it should look like. So inside here, what this is basically, it's just your folder. You see this up here. It's the folder that we're going to work out of locally on your machine. And what we want to do here is we want to go File, New. It'll create the file, and then Save As. What's the first file a web server looks for when you go to it? What's that? Index. Yep. So we want to create our index.html file. So now we created the first file of our website, the very first file that's going to be in our website. We want to do one more thing before we start coding. Go back out to your Explorer, your File Explorer. Go in that folder, and your index file should be there, correct? Yep. Right-click on it. Open with Google Chrome. It should be a blank page, right? If you have any other tabs open in Chrome or whatever, I ask you to drag it out and do kind of set up like I am. See how I just have it in its own window, its own tab, set up like that. Then go back to brackets. Why did I have you do it exactly in those steps? Anybody? So you can see what you're doing, but why in those steps? Why did I have you do it like that? Hit Alt-Tab once.
Okay, goes right through.
Hit Alt-Tab again. Yep. So the funny thing is if you see most developers when they're working, and where you'll see it mostly a lot, or at least where I see it the most, is in airports. Developers are working, and they don't have multiple monitors, and so Alt-Tab, they'll set themselves up to code and then go view, and you Alt-Tab back and forth. You end up with calluses on your thumb and your middle finger, or whatever you use to Alt-Tab. Awesome. So we're going to start taking things that we learned, right, so far up to this point. We're going to start taking these things that we've learned up to this point, and we're actually going to start making our website. So now we're starting. We have this site has absolutely nothing in it. If I Alt-Tab and I look here and I actually right-click on the page itself and say View Page Source, there's nothing in it, as should be, correct? You blank page as well. So we're going to go ahead and start making our first web page. What's the first thing that goes in a web page? What's the very first thing that goes in a web page? Doctype. Doctype. Yep. D-O-C-T-Y-P-E. And what kind of document is it? What's the HTML. So let's talk about that for a second. What is the doctype? Is it an element? Declaration. Thank you. It's a declaration. And what is it doing? What's the declaration doing?
Tells the files heavy HTML.
Yeah, it tells tells whatever's reading it, really, especially browsers, right? That this is an HTML file and should be handled as such, right? What's the next thing that we have in our web page when we're creating a web page? Close? I think HTML. Attaboy. Open and closed. And if you notice, brackets, if you haven't noticed by now, brackets will actually for these, what is this called? What is HTML? What is it? A declaration? Element? Element, yes. Element, aka tag, right? People will call them tags as well. So this is our HTML element. Tells the browser, whatever's reading it, everything inside it to treat it as HTML. And HTML, we have something that we call comments. I don't think we covered, but what comments are is our way of putting notes It's our way of putting notes into the web page that don't display on the front end and don't disrupt the code and don't get treated like code, but it's our way of putting notes in there. Why would we want to put notes into our web pages?
So it's easier to read.
So it's easier to read? That's yeah. What else? Why would we want to put comments into our web page?
Coding.
Helps you. How does it help your coding?
In case you have to go back.
In case you have to go back. What's that?
You have like a reference to go.
You have a reference. You know how many times, and for others and for yourself, you have no idea how many times I wish I were a good commenter. I'm not a good commenter. And therefore, I might have to revisit code I wrote 6 months ago, 2 years ago, and I sit there and spend the first 40 minutes trying to figure out what the hell it was I was doing, and why I wrote the code the way I did, where it turned out to be a good reason. And had I just put a line or two in a comment, I would have saved that 40 minutes of trying to figure out what I was doing, right? So commenting is really important, and we're going to do a lot of it in this class. Everything that I do, I expect when you submit your work, I expect to see in your work. All right, so at this point, let's hit Control Save, Control S, and then Alt Tab. And let's refresh our page. Nothing changed, right? Right click on it and view source. So we can see what we put in there is there. The browser is looking at it. It's a little happier with us because it has a little bit of information. But time to make a good point. One of the things we can also see when we put the comments in, right, is it gets put out to the public. The reason I mention this, a good example of where to be careful with comments. We were working on PetSmart's website, and one of my developers thought it was funny, and he put a comment in on the Pooper Scooper page about get that shit out of my lawn, and never took the comment back out. And next thing you know it, the client's calling us up saying, why does our page say get that shit out of my lawn in the comments? So be very careful what you put in your comments. It wasn't a production site, thank God. And actually what happens, and we'll learn about this later, when your site, you can use tools when you write code, certain code, and you use these tools that you basically process your HTML, and it doesn't compile it. It does something called minifies it. So each one of these lines, like each space in here that you see, right, that's represented by information, by data, by ones and zeros. Well, if you have tons and tons of spaces in your files and information, it makes your files grow, which makes it longer to pull down, which makes it longer to process. And so we use these minification processes, and what it does is it gets rid of all the spaces, gets rid of the comments, things like that. So when you push that code out to the server, right, it's just pure code. That's it. That's it. And we'll learn more about that as we go. So I have my HTML tags. I got my doctype declared, and I have my HTML tags. What is the next thing that we want to put into our page? The body? Do we want to put anything before the body? The head. You'll see me come through. You'll see me tab. See how I push that in? Tab that in. Now, most people will leave the head and the body out right along the left, but what we're doing is we're indenting our code. Why would we indent our code? Anybody? Easier to read. Makes more sense, right? HTML is a nested, things are nested, meaning you have elements inside of elements inside of elements, and it's a lot easier to read and see how those how that page is being built when you nest them. Additionally, a beautiful thing about nesting brackets, I believe even Notepad++ will do it for you, is as you end up with something nested inside of something, you can actually collapse it. In a little bit, we'll look at where that really is valuable, where that really helps us. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and just to form good habits, and we're going to put up here, what is the head used for, by the way? What do we put in the head? Like what kind of information? Title? Metadata? And what is the head specifically used for by the browser? General information, right? What we include in the head of the document is information that the browser uses to identify and understand, right, what's needed to process this HTML page that we're giving it. So what we'll put here is information used by the browser. We always open a comment, and we always close a comment. What's the next tag that goes inside the HTML tags?
The body?
The body. And as far as the body goes, what is the body? What is important to know about the body? As a general statement. Somebody says, well, what's inside the body tag? What's the body tag? What do you say to them?
It's for the viewers, for the people that are on the website, the stuff that you want them to see.
The content displayed.
Yeah.
Most of the content displayed, and we'll say the content displayed in the browser. Content displayed in the browser window. Control save. Control S. When I say save, I mean S. Sorry. Let's Alt Tab. I realize we're kind of. I just want to make sure that we're understanding each piece as we build through. So if this is old information to you, please just bear with me. To some people, this is brand new information. Let's view page source, and we can see we're actually building our HTML page, and the browser is getting it, right? Yes, sir. It doesn't? Did you say, go back and save and refresh? I bet it does. Makes you feel any better? I do that about once a day. I'll make a change and I'll go out and I'll be like, what's wrong? Oh, save. And you got to be careful because it's honestly, especially in web development, it's the little crap like that that's going to get you. It's not the real hard stuff. It's the little stuff that's going to make you waste time. You'll learn like one character or not saving and looking for the change.
I was forgetting to close them yesterday.
Yeah.
Like the last arrow.
And that'll throw your page way off.
Yeah, because I kept getting red.
Yeah.
the red coding, and I was like, what's going on? And then I go back, and I'm like, oh, okay.
Yep.
I didn't close them.
You got to make sure you close them. All right. So if we go inside the head now, can anybody tell me what the first thing is that we're going to put inside the head?
Title.
Nope.
Meta type.
Meta, right? Character set. Yes, sir. Good job. I'll give you that. That was good. So we're going to create a meta tag. Does anybody know what meta tags really are? If you think about it, meta, right, is really just standing for, additional information. And the funny thing about it with meta tags is that they're in everything. They're in images. They're all over the place. You use them every day. They affect you every day. There are meta tags in everything that you do. And this meta tag particular, whatever. This meta, no, I wasn't drinking. This meta tag is telling the browser to use UTF-8, which is a character set, which is a way to interpret the ones and zeros, right, to process that information. It's telling the browser to use that specific translation of character set. Does that make sense to you? So in other words, if we changed it to something else, chances are it'll process pretty okay with the way technology is today. But to be exact, to make sure that small a and that big A look like a small a and a big A like we intended it to, we dictate what character set to use. Character sets really can, one of the places that you really see them as we get further in, will make different like icons and things like that using specific character set codes, and that's where the character set really, can apply. Something like if we want a star and we use one character set to make that star, and we forget to declare the character set, and their browser is using something different for some unknown reason, that star might show up as goobly-ga or just as nothing, or some, or God forbid, like a middle finger or something, so we want to be careful with that kind of. What's the next thing we want to put in the head of the document? Title. So for the title, we're going to put inside out dash your name, full name. We're going to hit save, Alt tab, and we're going to refresh, and watch your tab when you refresh. Get it? Title should have shown up here. We'll talk about title in a minute. We're going to add one more piece of information. But first, we're going to add another meta tag. Does anybody know what I'm adding? Description. And we have to put content in that description. So we're going to call, for the content, we're going to put inside out is a class project we use to learn HTML. And then we can actually close meta tags off right inside the tag itself by putting a forward slash at the end of it before we put the closing caret. When you're done, Alt tab out. Well, save. Make sure you save. Refresh. Your page should still appear with the title up in the tag, up in the tab, correct? If I right click and I view page source, I should see my title and my meta information. So I'm going to go to Google. You don't have to go there. But what I'm going to do, I want to search for let's search for Bob Marley, since we were talking about Jamaica this morning. If you look here, this portion of the information displayed in Google is the title. It's found in the title tag. It's in the meta information. This is in a description. In the meta description tag that we create, this is where this comes from. And so the way that we can be sure of that is we can go to that page and view page source. And we can see, just like I said, there's the title. Let me find our description. Instead of looking, you just control find and then start typing. And that's how you find it in here. And here's the description that was put there, right there in Google. So if we go back, that should match up, right? Explore the legacy and history. Explore the legacy and history of the legend, Bob Marley. The title, again, Bob Marley, official site, blah, blah, blah. Bob Marley, official site. And here's the first example that we can see of where the character set plays a role. See how that ampersand is there? See how this represents an ampersand? That's based on the character set. So if we change the character set, that might show up differently than an ampersand. So the character set, again, is kind of like a translation piece for us that allows us to put special characters out there that normally would get processed as code if we just put the character itself in. So in other words, if we just put that ampersand in without ampersand AMP semicolon, that would try to process that as code and blow it up. And that'll make more sense to you if it's not crystal clear. A lot of this as we move along will solidify itself. You'll gain more and more in understanding. Again, remember the idea here. Some of you, this might be old school for you. But we're going at it like you've never looked at code before, and we're going to walk through just piece by piece by piece by piece, and help you wrap your head around, right? Kind of instead of starting off with this big chunk of code, we're just going to slowly, walk into the water. Okay. So what we want to do though is we want to come back because we're learning to be good at our commenting. We're going to go ahead and put a comment over the title. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to do a multi-line comment at this point to kind of help you understand that, you can do comments with multiple lines. And we'll just put displayed anywhere the title is used. I'm tabbing in, by the way. That's how I'm going in. I'm using the tab for the browser, search engines, etc. I'm going to tab into this, and I'm going to close it. And there you see I can do a multiple line comment. For the meta, we're going to go ahead and put another comment in, and we're going to say, I know it seems like overkill, but used to display information about the page by search engines and other sites looking at our page. Period. Close. Save. Now, the reason I put that used to display information about our page by search engines and other sites looking at our page. Same thing applies up top for title. I'm sure some of you at some point have like put a link in Facebook or in Slack or in some kind of social media, and holy crap, all of a sudden like it made this nice little card with the title and some information about the page that you're linking to. Is everybody aware of what I'm talking about? Yeah? So what that does is it reaches out to your page and it actually grabs the description in the title and it uses that to populate that card that it makes. That's where that information comes from. So both of these are really important, way more important than you think if you just look at your web page. Because if you just look at your web page, you're like, well, I really don't see the description, and the title just shows up in the top. Yet the title and the description are basically the front door to your web page, to the page, because it's used by so many different things outside of your website. Awesome. So at this point, one thing I do want to do real quick, unfortunately, Notepad++ people, you can't do this. But at home, revisit. You don't have to do this. It's to make your life a little easier. I'm kind of a jerk about clean code. It's just important to me, and the bigger your pages get, the more important clean code is. What I want you to do, see this little Lego over here on the side? Whatever you want to call it. Click it. This dialog box should come up. Type in BEA, and you should see this capitalized. There's another one below. We want this one. It says Beautify. What you want to do is click the install button. And once you install it, you should end up with this little magic wand over here on the right. And when you click it, watch what it does to your code. It basically cleans your code up for you. If you notice, it pulls the head and the body out all the way out to the outmost left. The reason it does that is because, honestly, that is the top of the two areas instead of, indenting one inside of HTML. Because it's trying to save you space to the right. It's trying to make things better to the right. If we hit save, always a good idea. Every once in a while, right? Hit save and go out, refresh, look at your site, make sure you didn't screw something up, make sure it's coming up, no errors, things like that. In this case, we still have nothing to see, so you're pretty safe. One of the other things to point out is, so now at this point we're done inside putting stuff inside the head, right? And you can imagine just with these couple lines of code that we created, imagine if there were a couple hundred lines, how hard it would be, right, to read and find things and stuff like that. And that's where you'll see, I believe in Notepad++ it does it as well. One of the nice features about what we call an IDE, which is what we're using, which is a development environment, basically, is you get this. You can actually close elements and hide the content in them, which makes it easier for you to work on your code. So we know we're done working in the head, right? So we might as well just close it so we don't have to look at it, so it's not in our way. Awesome. Awesome sauce. What movie is that? Legos, I think. Everything is awesome. No? Man, wait till you have kids. You'll watch every Disney movie out there. All right. So now we're going to go inside the body. And we're going to start building our page. There's something you haven't learned about yet, and you will next week. But you're going to start learning about them today. And it's not that difficult, but there are things that you're going to want to know about them, and they'll be part of your homework next week. With HTML5, up until HTML5, we use containers called divs, right, or tables. And the funny thing is we can put an ID inside of these elements, and you'll learn about that as we move along. Almost every website you go to would have a div, and the ID would be header. Another one would be, the ID would be footer. Another one would be, the ID would be section. And after a while, finally, the guys who standardize HTML, W3C, they're like, all right, this is silly. We need to have a header div, container, we need element, we need to have a footer element, we need to have a section element. And so you'll find in technology, I think it's funny because they have these, well, let's create an element called a header. And it's like, it's like the coming of Jesus or something, they just figured out something amazing because, we got these new great things. Oh, it's complicated. It's called a header, But the funny thing is I think that they complicate it for a lot of people. And I think that since they've started teaching coding in actually middle school and grade school and stuff like that now, it's actually helped coders, older coders, stop making everything so difficult, right? Because now it doesn't make them look dumb to create this new piece of code or a way of coding so that an 8-year-old can learn it. And by the way, that helps us, right? But up until then, until they had that excuse, it was like, oh, well, that would just be silly because that's not professional and that's not technical and that's not whatever. It's called semantic coding. HTML5 introduced semantic coding. Semantic coding is really exactly what semantic elements, not coding, but elements. And it's exactly what it sounds like. Semantics are, right, words, the way we use the words or whatever. And so instead of, in the past, what we would have done is this. We would have created a div, and divs are just containers in HTML. Divs are a way of grouping things together, keeping things together, right? So we would have created a div, and you don't have to type this, and we would have put in here equals header, and that our header would go in there. Now, in HTML5, we just header. Okay? What is a header? Does anybody know what a header is? Okay, so you're thinking of heading tags.
Makes it bold and larger than the rest of the content.
Okay, that's awesome. You're doing your homework. But no, that's a heading. It's a heading tag, 1 through 6, right? And it gets confusing. Right, the whole header, heading, it can get, right? So, and I get silly, and I feel like a 9-year-old because I'm like, you got to use the words over and over and over, and after a while, you feel like, holy crap. So, what is a header?
Like the thing at the top of websites where there's usually a menu.
Right there you go, brother. Header. This thing right here, if I inspect this, see, you can see actually a lot of code here. And the funny thing is that's kind of silly to put the ID of header inside the header. That's absolutely silly, and you'll learn why as we learn more code. That there in itself, anyway, I'm not going to pick on Rack. But you can see, right, here's a container. The header has the container in it. And what's highlighted in blue is the header. And you actually see the little, over there on the left, I can't go off of this or I'll lose it. In like pink fuchsia says header and then ID. The hashtag is what represents an ID in HTML, and we'll learn more about that as we go. You don't have to know that today. But that's the header. While we're in here, we might as well go down here and see if they did a footer. And we'll learn about using this tool, by the way. Okay. Here they used the tag correctly. It's a footer, semantic tag. Can everybody see that? So that footer, if you look, all this content here, right? If I go down over these little elements, you see them light up, right? All that's inside the footer. Header, which is at the top, and then the footer down below. Because I basically would. All right, so let's go ahead. We're going to put our header in our document. And while we're in here, let's go ahead and put our footer in here too. And we're going to work back up the tree here. And inside our footer, let's use a paragraph tag. So a paragraph tag, so there's two types of elements that you're going to or learning about. They're block elements and they're line elements. The difference between them, a block element basically says anything within my element, right, is its own entity. And therefore, anything next to it, before it or after it, may not come next to it. In other words, push it down, push it up, treat me as my own thing. A line element says it's okay. You can come next to me. I'll show you that right now. So this is the footer, and we're inside a paragraph tag. Let's put another paragraph tag. We place redundant. Spell check wrecked me, man. It's a good thing I'm not teaching English, or y'all would be working backwards. We place redundant information here. If I save and I go out, oops, and I go out and I refresh, see how it bumped it down? And it will bump it down no matter, let me exaggerate the point. We're on one line there, right? If I hit save, hit refresh, it's still right. It still returns. It treats it as its own, and that's called a block element because it takes that whole block up. Doesn't matter what's next to it. How is that? Why is that a big deal? I'm going to use a tag you haven't learned about yet, but I want to make an example out of this for you. I'm going to use what's called a span tag element. And if I put span in here, this is called a line element. And where the difference is if I go out and refresh now, see how it just fell together? So a block element says, let me be, anything before me or after me, right, cannot be in the same block. And a block, consider a block takes the entire width of the page, where a line just takes the width that it needs. A line element just takes the width that it needs. Just know that. It'll make more sense to you as we go. I'm going to back this off, and by hitting Control Z, for those of you who don't know, and I'm just going to go back to this. Additionally, down here in the footer, I'm going to change this to an H4. Heading 4. We're learning about these now. And what that'll do is it just adds a little style to my... And we'll talk more about headings then. In my header, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use something called an H1, heading tag 1. Then I'm going to use an H2 below it. And what we're doing is we're putting that title that shows up, right, that on the top of your page and your header. We're putting that up there. And if you see me spell something wrong, don't be scared to tell me. Everybody with me? Any questions? You're learning about heading tags, elements this week, 1 through 6. They have SEO value. What do I mean by SEO value, anybody? Search engine optimization, meaning search engines actually use these tags as a way to classify information. I'll go out, I'll refresh, and there we can see. To make things a little more interesting, we'll go ahead and we'll put a section in today. We're getting further than the morning class did, which is awesome. Now, a section is what we use. It's exactly what it sounds like, right? We're making a section in the website, in the web page. And what we're going to do in here is we're going to put another paragraph tag. By the way, if you don't put a paragraph element in and you just put text there, HTML browser will assume that it's a paragraph. It'll treat it, but that's bad coding. That's bad coding. And in here we will put, this is where the page content goes. That's kind of a bad statement, but we'll let it go for now. Go out, refresh. So great, we got a couple lines of code, a couple lines of text there. We have a little bit of time left, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to make this a little more interesting, even more so, by actually kind of defining it and making it look more like a website for ourselves, okay? And the way we're going to do that is I'm going to introduce you to a little bit of CSS. Is there, before I try to move forward, is there anything that, anyone that doesn't understand anything that we've done up to this point? Is this Chinese to anybody? Awesome. Well, I guess if you are Chinese, then it's not an issue if it's Chinese, but. So in the header, we're going to use something called a style attribute. And what an attribute is additional information about that element that we can use in that element. The style one, we use something called CSS, cascading style sheets, which we will get into more and more. But this is going to be your first taste of a cascading styles. And what the styles allow us to do is to put the paint on the house, right? To put the flowers in the front walkway. The style, so the HTML is really just the structure, right? It's the boards, it's the plywood that goes on the side, and the roofing and the tar paper. The style sheets are the terracotta, tile roof, the beautiful siding that goes on the house, gives it color, gives it life, gives it whatever. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to just real simple. We're going to go after a background color. And for now, to keep it really super simple, we're just going to go after gray. So it's style, the name of the attribute, equals, inside the quotations is the information that we want it to process, right? In that information we want it to process is we're saying we want the background color of the header to be gray, period. Save, refresh. Now it's gray. Let's do the same thing with the footer. And for those of you who are lazy, you can honestly just go copy, come down here in the footer and paste. And actually, a good coder is really good at copying and pasting. Think about the time you save, right? And if I come out here and I refresh, now it's starting to look more like that header footer kind of thing, right? The semicolon after the gray, right? The semicolon says, here's the thing. We can put, so we put background color, right? And that represents equals, right? Gray. Then this says, I'm done with this command. So now you can go ahead and you can enter another command. Does that make sense? So the semicolon is really saying, that's the end of this instruction. So now you can start another instruction.